Across the 4 previous Halo titles, Bungie had demonstrated revolutionary game design and ability to work under pressure. They lived up to the hype and had shown extreme emotional maturity. Between the games, trailers, books, spin-offs, and the other series under the Xbox umbrella like Gears of War and Fable, Microsoft was at the top of the world come 2010, and Bungie had played a major part in this success. Behind the scenes though, Bungie had actually broken off from Xbox back in 2007 after the release of Halo 3, but were contractually obligated to create 2 more Halo games. The reasoning behind the falling out of Bungie and Microsoft is probably more complex than we, the public, have ever been given access to, but at its core, it seems that Bungie generally just wanted to move on from Halo and make something else. Posters featured on the walls of New Mombasa in the original Xbox 360 release of ODST already revealed a desire to move on and work on what would eventually become Destiny, but their deal with Microsoft meant that they still had 1 more Halo game to work on after that. And with such a clear teaser at the end of Halo 3 for where Master Chief's journey would go next, it was pretty obvious to the world exactly what Bungie's final Halo title would be, what they would work on to go out with a bang. The ultimate continuation from all the Halo games they had made thus far. Halo Reach. Wait a minute, that's not the obvious choice at all. In spite of how simple and logical it may have seemed to continue the franchise and end on a big proper Halo 4, Bungie chose to go back in time and revisit some of their establishing lore by covering the events that led directly into the opening of Halo Combat Evolved, where the Pillar of Autumn was fleeing from a Covenant fleet that had invaded a planet known as Reach. Good gravy, it's a prequel.
Send me out with a bang.
Releasing on the 14th of September 2010, Halo Reach is, like the other mainline Halo games before it, a first-person shooter with simple-to-understand mechanics, surprisingly deep lore, a pretty fantastic story, and a great soundtrack. At the end of the day, it is another Halo game by Bungie, and there is nothing wrong with that so long as it's as good as the games that had come before it. For me personally, this game came out not long before I had transitioned into life as a teenager, and as a teenager during the Xbox 360 era of games, I was overwhelmed with an intense desire to play games rated PEGI 18, which means that, quite frankly, Halo Reach came out at the right time and place for me at that point in my life to go on to become my by far most played Halo game of all time. I already sort of clickbaited Halo 3 ODST as being my favourite Halo game, and I also already said that Halo 2 might be the best one, so I feel I reasonably can't justify using either of those statements on Reach, but I think I would still argue that it's at least the Halo game I have the most attachment to. The thing is, everything I love about ODST and the way it told a story that was bleak and somber is present in Reach. This game is kinda dark in a way, even just the premise alone by being a prequel focused on the downfall and invasion of an entire planet basically sets the tone for what the game is at its core, a game where going into it, you know you lose. ODST was a game where you had already lost, but Reach makes you play through the downfall of an entire planet and watching, level by level, as things go from bad to worse. Halo 3 already gave the series a conclusive and relatively happy ending, so Bungie's last 3 games focusing on a more emotional heart in the midst of galactic annihilation is just so fascinating and unique, that it adds a lot to the universe of Halo that just isn't bombastic dialogue, action movie cliches and cool moments. You get to sit down with a group of characters, and you get to be a part of a story where, realistically, none of you are the protagonist. You're simply trying your best to stop the inevitable and prepare what you can for the future. Add to that Bungie's commitment to a massive multiplayer mode, the largest collection of weapons thus far in the series, pretty darn good graphics for 2010, Forge mode, firefight, like a million obscure Easter eggs in a game that, as far as I can tell, didn't necessarily face the same kind of hardships in development as their previous games, and honestly, I couldn't think of a better finale for Bungie to go out on.
So that's our new number 6.
Halo Reach has the player fill the role of a pretty blank slate of a character known only as Noble 6. Named as such as they are the 6th member of the game's core cast of characters, Noble Team. You got Noble 1, Carter, the confident leader, Noble 2, Kat, the smart one, Noble 3, Jun, the sharpshooter, Noble 4, Emil, the loose cannon, Noble 5, George, the big guy, and Noble 6, the newcomer who may just be the most useful member of the team. I wonder where I've heard of that kind of team before. One really cool feature about Noble 6 is that they are, in a way, a character you are able to create. You can change the character's gender and therefore voice, and you can equip similar armor sets similar to Halo 3, except this time they are present in the campaign as well as the multiplayer. Mine's yellow. This is just a neat little way to add a bit more personality and customization to the single player side of the game, and makes Noble 6 simultaneously feel more personal to you, while also making them more of a character than Rookie was because they're actually allowed to speak, albeit pretty rarely, much like Chief. The first alleged mission is, as is tradition, a cutscene, and that gives us a brief glimpse of these characters as Noble 6 is introduced as a replacement for a guy who died in the trailers of the game because yes, once again the trailers for Halo Reach were phenomenal. This guy, Tom, was a popular dude in the squad, and 6 being highly involved with a group called Oni, who I haven't mentioned too much in previous videos solely to give them more prominence in this one, makes them be seen as quite suspicious by the squad, especially since they seem to be portrayed as somewhat of a lone wolf type character by and large, a wildcard who doesn't play by the rules. 6 is classified as, and I quote, hyper-lethal, a classification of Spartan that is only assigned to one other Spartan in the UNSC, with that being the Master Chief himself. So while we are working with a blank slate, they already give enough cool little details to make 6 feel like a fresh take on the Spartan, and gives them and the squad enough interesting traits to immediately make them interesting from this small cutscene. One thing of note, however, is that yes, these characters are all Spartans, but they are not Spartan 2s like Chief, and we already discussed that Spartan 1s are exceedingly rare, so what's up with that? Well, these guys are Spartan 3s, except George. George actually is a Spartan 2 like Chief, but the rest of them are Spartan 3s. Let's talk about it. To recap on the other Spartan types, we had the Orion project through the 2490s, which yielded a handful of successful Spartan 1s such as Sergeant Avery Johnson, and then the Spartan 2 program in 2506, which involved the kidnapping of children by one Catherine Halsey of the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI for short, to create super soldiers like the Master Chief. But if there's anything you should know about the military, it's that a successful experiment encourages repeating, and in 2531 they went ahead with a new experiment, although this time it seems that ONI wanted to circumvent Halsey's involvement at all. This does not mean that the program wasn't morally reprehensible, however. In fact, the goal of this project, the Spartan 3 program, was to basically create the soldiers quickly and mass produce them. As such, instead of kidnapping kids from families and filling them with drugs and cybernetics, they opted for recruitment campaigns and orphanages to get children who lost their homes at the hands of the Covenant, and then filling them with drugs and cybernetics, giving them suits of armor that were decent but didn't come close to the Mjolnir armor, before shipping them off en masse to participate in what were essentially suicide missions. The casualty rate of Spartan 3s was shockingly close to 100%, and by the time of Halo Reach's story, the number of them were already dwindling, though they were still much more prevalent and numerous in the military than Spartan 2s. Now, in spite of what I just said, Spartan 3s who beat the odds and performed above and beyond the rest of their peers would often be plucked out of the suicide mission meat grinder and placed into specialist squads of Mjolnir-clad Spartan 3s, leading me once again to introduce you to Noble Team. Shortly after Noble 6 joins the team, they get assigned by their commanding officer Holland to check out a fairly local farmland area where a very important communications relay has seemingly been attacked and abandoned. Suspecting sabotage, Noble Team is sent in the first proper mission of the game to keep the peace and investigate. Flying in, they investigate a wreckage, speak to some locals, and find that something is just off. The whole place feels largely devoid of life, and shortly after arriving, the culprit is revealed. Unsurprisingly, the Covenant are on Reach. I mean, to the player this is kinda obvious, like yeah, that's the entire premise of the game, but in the universe this would be a shocking revelation that changes not only the parameters of this mission, but means the whole military here on Reach is now suddenly kicked into action to get ready for evacuation and to try to launch a counter-offensive, once they have their communications back. Which means from here on out the mission sort of plays out similarly to the level Halo from Halo Combat Evolved. The one where you got in a car and drove to 3 different locations in any order you want, except you only have to do 2 of the 3 locations in this one, and you simply have to clear out the Covenant forces with George's help, before Jun flies his Pelican down to pick you up and fly you off to the relay, where you protect Kat as she hacks open the doors, getting to fight alongside the rest of Noble Team, making you properly feel like part of the squad. After breaching the doors and entering the facility, Noble finds the whole place shot up with plasma weaponry, while Kat picks up a little data drive and a young woman speaks to George in Hungarian, wanting both to get away from the big scary Spartans, but also trying to warn that this guy is still in the facility. Cue the action music as 6 and George storm the facility, shooting their way through this pitch black area and defeating the elite stragglers, including 2 Zealot class elites who effectively serve as a specialist unit in the Covenant to prepare for invasions, before they reset the facility and allow Kat to set up comms between Carter and their commanding officer. We get to see some of the personalities of Noble Team as we see how warm-hearted and kind George is, how cold and unsympathetic Emil is, and that there's clearly a bit of tension but care between Carter and Kat. And strangely in character for him, Jun isn't in the room. After affirming with Holland about the whole Covenant situation, the military kicks into gear now to prepare the best they can for the invasion, with Noble Team in the middle of it all.
There are no rebels. The Covenant are on Reach.
After that first proper mission, we're given a set of 2 missions that are effectively just a squad going around and scouting stuff out, gathering intel and helping prepare whatever countermeasures they can. The first of these, only Sword Base, opens with Six and Cat dropping into the titular base to help clear it of Covenant and destroy the ship that is attacking it. After a lengthy courtyard fight, they are ushered outside into the surrounding wilderness to once again reset communications, and to set up anti-air defences. You get to choose which one to go to first, but you do have to do both of them, and the area is real pretty. Besides some new toys to play with, not too much of note happens on the outskirts of Sword Base, so once you're all done there, you get to wrap it up, return to the courtyard, fight some hunters, take a lift that gets all weird and floating doesn't work super well, and enter what I guess is another courtyard. The final objective is to head up to the roof and shoot down a bunch of Banshees and Phantoms to protect the big ships coming in to destroy the big Covenant ship. Overall, it's just a really simple level with a few moments to hang out with the squad, getting to be with Kat, George and Emil fairly often throughout. After watching the ship crash into the ocean, Carter calls for a rendezvous with the team for a meeting with none other than Halsey herself, something George is seemingly quite pleased to hear. In spite of this, Halsey is very displeased to see literally every Spartan 3 only being in any way cordial to George. Halsey does not like Spartan 3s, they weren't her project and therefore something that she finds to be disagreeable and beneath her, just as she does hearing any info about the surviving woman we found, preferring instead to regale a tale of the importance of seeing zealots and how that might implicate the elites having a priority to gather only intelligence at the relay, perhaps indicating that they were wanting valuable data from the organisation to find something of importance to their religion. While nobody in this room knows it, it seems very likely they are looking for any clues of Forerunner data, potentially even looking for Halo. The scientist who died at the relay station seemed to have a latchkey that was of vital import to Halsey, and calling out Kat for her kleptomania, she requested the data be handed over in perhaps the rudest manner possible, which leads to Carter making a statement that they are an active Spartan team for whom Halsey has no legal control over, signalling for Noble Team to leave the station and get on with what he deems more important intelligence gathering operations on Covenant activities. As such, in the dead of night, Jun and Six are sneaking their way across a cliff face, headed in the direction of intel pointing to Covenant structures in the area. This is our sniper mission, and it's probably the best sniper mission Halo has ever had, feeling like a proper stealth operation with invisibility, assassinations, and cutting through the heart of a restful Covenant camp. Of course, this is Halo and it's not a stealth game, so action always breaks out eventually, including fighting these hideous things if you so choose, but overall this starting section has a simply wonderful atmosphere. Eventually the 2 Spartans meet some civilians who disobeyed directives to flee the area in order to gather some smuggled weaponry. Usually this would be a sign of insurrection and require punitive action, but Jun makes an exception if they share their goods with Noble Team, leading to a defense segment where we protect this area from incoming Covenant trespassers. Once finished, those smugglers lead us upstream to a Covenant pylon that is jamming signals in the area, and making it impossible to see what is going on beyond. Kat requests the tower be set to blow in the morning, so it of course falls in the capable hands of the player to protect Jun while he plants the explosives. Neither of these defending segments are particularly long-lasting, just a couple waves of enemies, some hunters at the base of the pylon, and I don't think the game feels like it slows down at all in these levels. Just some great little firefights and a really cool little mission. A cool little mission which ends with the device being planted and ready for Kat to detonate at a later time, as the two march on ahead through more Covenant encampments to see exactly what it is the aliens are hiding behind that pylon. A gigantic invading army with multiple gigantic towers, huge ships and more Covenant forces than anyone expected. Kat suggests the two get some sleep in as everyone prepares for a large head-on assault to get in there before the Covenant are ready as the mission concludes. These two levels aren't necessarily anything super special or unique, but they, along with the first proper non-cutscene level, set up a really solid foundation for one of the main things this game's story is about, by showcasing exactly who Noble Team are and what it is they're fighting against. Insurmountable odds. And honestly, they're also just really fun missions to play and a really solid opening third to the story.
Listen, Reach has been good to me. Time has come to return the favor.
That is a pretty big army that the UNSC has amassed, and Noble Team are leading the charge as Kat detonates that pylon, something that will allow bigger ships to come in now and provide air support. Speaking of which, however, a bunch of Banshees come in and the whole army gets a bit scrambled, made worse when the tiny little bridge they needed to cross is destroyed, with the disaster being amplified by the appearance of a Wilhelm scream. Classic. This level kicks off with us getting to play with a grenade launcher and being tasked with taking down the Covenant's air defences in the area to help the aforementioned air support gain a foothold in the area, something that will be necessary to take out a gigantic tower that serves as our primary objective. This is for the most part another driving level and sees us stop at a few locations along the way, namely an AA gun and a mining facility with the optional objective to rush on ahead and defeat a zealot, for extra praise from our AI coordinator Auntie Dot, who I forgot to mention up until now, and then finishing up at another AA gun. This one has hunters and drones inside. Once that's done, a Falcon carrying George is able to land down and give Six a little lift to that big tower, with ample opportunity to cause a ruckus along the way. Alas, the dome is some sort of EMP that sends the helicopter hurtling to the ground, with the Spartans being the only survivors. But it's not all bad because I got a cool jetpack. The game intends for you to take a grab lift to the top of the tower, but if you're cool like me, you'll hijack a Banshee and fly up there in style instead, disabling the defences around the tower, jumping to safety with George, and I guess Carter's here too, and watching the show as a ship comes in to destroy the tower, which is some sort of teleporter bringing Covenant troops in by the way, and the day is saved.
No, somebody tell me this ain't happening.
Oh, the humanity. With that plan resulting in a colossal failure, and the UNSC not really having the ability to front another doomed head-on assault, the planet is scrambling into full-on evacuation mode to get people out of there, with Noble Team effectively being put on babysitting duty, to make sure things go smoothly. This in action doesn't go over well though, and after some back and forth between Carter and Kat, she suggests a plan that is equal parts reckless and ingenious. Fly into space to the big Covenant ship that delivered this army here, and detonate a slipspace drive inside, tearing the ship in half with the power of faster-than-light technology. Surprisingly, Holland is on board for this crazy scheme, and in a way it makes sense that with how dire the situation looks after that ship was destroyed, that a Hail Mary that basically only costs one Spartan team if it fails isn't that bad of a gambit at the end of the day. And so Noble deploys on a beach and embarks on the longest and, in my opinion, weakest mission of the game. The beach bit is fine, maybe a bit forgettable, but once you get inside the space station and get a glimpse of the spaceship Six will be flying, by the way, Six can fly spaceships, once you see that you're thinking, oh cool, I get to fly a spaceship, this will be a really cool level. Couple that with the cinematography of the takeoff sequence and how realistic and well designed the camera angles and movements are is just breathtaking. They did a fantastic job in this cutscene and really all the cutscenes in the game, and this level just feels out of this world. But then you have to fly the ship, and it controls fine, and perhaps this may come as a shock to some people, there's not a lot of cover in space. There's not a lot of anything, in fact, and so when you're tasked with sitting and defending the station from incoming Covenant attackers, it makes for a pretty long and difficult engagement that feels like it just keeps on going, and I swear they forgot to put checkpoints in the thing. You have a few allied ships helping out, and eventually the station gets its act together and gets some defences online to help out, but it feels like it takes an eternity to sit through this part, drop George off in a Pelican with a drive in tow, and head off with your small fleet, which includes a fairly large ship that has donated its core for the mission. To set this improvised bomb inside a fairly large ship so that it may fly back to the main ship, and then have the device detonate and destroy them both, cutting the proverbial throat of this invasion force and, if nothing else, delaying the Covenant invasion. The second spaceship segment is mercifully not as problematic in my opinion. You still don't have a lot of cover to work with, but I think there's just so many allied ships with you that you don't need it as much. The Covenant are too busy shooting your buddies to care about you, and you're too busy shooting the engines of the ship to get their attention. With the engines disabled and the rest of the fleet scattered to the winds, you can board the ship and sit in awe as this level is still going. After cutting through the entire ship, watching George land his Pelican with the core in a big hangar, continuing forwards and setting the ship on a refueling run with the big ship, you return to the Pelican and hold out yet again for the Covenant to trickle in and try and stop you. Even though I played the game on heroic for the sake of ease of this video, this level really ramps the difficulty up quite a lot compared to the previous ones, and with just how long it keeps on going for, it's not hard for me to just feel kind of done with this level at this point, which is apt because the level is now done. The core is placed, the ship is on its collision course, and unfortunately, every ship that could get us out of here is now either destroyed, inaccessible, or inoperable, meaning the only way back to Reach is by jumping out and falling down. Worse, however, the core is damaged and won't be able to detonate by itself. Someone has to stay behind, and the physically larger and stronger George manhandles Six as he makes the decision that he will be the one to make the noble sacrifice. He throws Six out of the airlock, and as they begin their long descent, they watch as George activates the drive and destroys the Covenant ship, dying in the process as a hero who saved Reach. For just a few short moments.
Just one thing, I've seen your file. I'm glad to have your skill set.
While Noble 6 is busy falling, we should have plenty of time to discuss the gameplay of Halo Reach and how it has evolved from what Bungie had done beforehand. I've already discussed Halo's generalist gameplay loop a whopping 5 times, so I don't feel it necessary to go into too much detail on all the specifics of it. Check out the earlier ones if you want to know more, but if you haven't seen those or need a recap on how a first-person shooter plays for some reason, then I suppose I can go over it one more time. You can run, shoot, throw grenades, melee, crouch, jump surprisingly high, and even drive vehicles. Pretty standard affairs for a Halo game at this point, as are features like the radar telling you where enemies are, instant kills if you melee an enemy in the back, and the limit of 2 guns to carry, although dual wielding has been removed. removed, like in ODST. I am playing the game via the Master Chief Collection on Steam with a mouse and keyboard, and I recorded my footage in heroic difficulty, though I have played the whole MCC on Legendary if that gives me any more credibility in your eyes. Few things, however, have returned to their earlier incarnations. Namely, Halo 2 and 3 had you rely solely on regenerating shields to stay alive, while Combat Evolved had the shield in addition to a non-regenerating health bar that required first aid kits to recover. The logic for this not being in Halo 2 and 3 was because of Chief's brand new top-of-the-line armor, so as a prequel it makes sense to bring this feature back. There are also a few new mainstay features to your kit, however, as the equipment available in Halo 3 has been reworked and expanded on in a way to be permanent, usable armor abilities with a cooldown. We'll talk about them each individually in a bit, but these change things up quite a lot. You can also assassinate people, which is nothing but a cool backstab animation, though it can save you from falling to your death. Now the part where we discuss each weapon available in the game. This time around, we have the biggest and most robust selection of weaponry available thus far in a Halo game, so strap in as I rattle them off, the weapons' purposes and their effectiveness, all within my personal opinion. And starting with the UNSC weapons. The iconic assault rifle returns with a new look to make it look less technologically advanced, and is best used for stripping shields off of enemies to line them up for a kill. I think this is one of the weakest portrayals of the assault rifle though, sadly. The Magnum, on the other hand, is back in all its Combat Evolved glory, being a hyper-lethal, accurate weapon with a scope that is excellent all around in just about any situation. Its ammo count is a little low, and it is outclassed in its role, but it feels so good to use now that it's no longer hindered by dual wielding. The shotgun is pretty good in this game. It struggles a little bit in the campaign due to how strong Elite's melee attacks are, but it still does a lot of damage up close and has that satisfying kick to it. The designated marksman rifle, or DMR for short, is a brand new weapon that fills the role of the battle rifle as your go-to weapon for all combat situations, being the perfect all-rounder whose primary difference is being single fire instead of burst fire. Like its forefather, it is the best and most consistent weapon in the game, and it's hard to deny that it feels very fun to use. The sniper rifle of course returns for people who enjoy sniping, and honestly if there is anything different about this weapon compared to any other game, I didn't notice it. It's a sniper rifle in a video game and I have little else to say really. More or less the same could be said about the rocket launcher once again returning, though it is able to lock onto enemy aircraft such as Banshees, which is a new and interesting utility that helps separate it from other explosive weapons. Speaking of which, the grenade launcher is a brand new weapon that surprisingly isn't the replacement for the brute shot that you might think it is. This weapon is quite complicated. It kind of does a lot of different things, as you can just shoot it and it will explode like a grenade would, but you can instead hold the fire button down to make it more like a timed explosive that you can choose when to detonate, setting off an explosion and an EMP that disables shields or vehicles. It even has like a little heads up display that shows how many people are stood near the grenade, allowing for you to use it like a landmine. It's one of the most interesting weapons in any Halo game because of how much utility it can provide, but it is ultimately outclassed as an explosive weapon damage-wise and as an EMP by the plasma pistol. Still cool though. The Spartan laser also returns and is basically the same. Pointed at something, hold it down and fire a giant laser that eviscerates enemies, especially those in vehicles. It's good, slow, but good. If you need to eviscerate multiple vehicles, however, the Spartan laser just won't cut it. Fortunately, the target locator will let you call in an airstrike that destroys everything within a generous circle. Admittedly, this weapon is more of a gimmick that only shows up in one campaign level and in Firefight, and while it's a great spectacle to watch and really satisfying, it's not something I would consider a serious weapon due to how limited it is in its appearances. The frag grenade is a grenade. Covenant weapons now, starting with the aforementioned plasma pistol, which retains its status from Halo 3 as the designated shield stripping device. One charge shot from this bad boy sets off almost any shielded enemy for a headshot combo, making it a necessity on legendary difficulty, and an all-around great weapon as long as you don't bother with the uncharged shots too much. The plasma rifle returns of course, and is, like the Magnum, much improved due to not being lumbered by the necessity of being balanced for dual wielding, making it once again a shield destroying monster. It's still far from the strongest weapon, but it basically just does the assault rifle's job, but probably better than the assault rifle itself does. A curious weapon though is the plasma repeater, which basically serves as a worse version of the plasma rifle that as far as I know only exists to give the elite enemies to make them not too strong or frustrating to fight compared to if they had the plasma rifle. It can be cycled to reduce its overheating, which is a neat feature, but I don't really care for or about this gun to be honest. The Needler is back and feels great just as it did in Combat Evolved in Halo 3, exploding enemies who are hit with too many needles, dealing massive damage and being, all in all, just a really satisfying gun. The Needle Rifle is a new variant of the Needler that replaces my beloved Covenant Carbine, which you may or may not know to be my favourite Halo weapon. The Needle Rifle isn't as satisfying to me to use as the Carbine was, but functionally it might actually honestly be better, as it basically does the same thing as a single shot precision weapon, but now it fires needles, which means the enemies get to explode if you hit them enough. It's good I guess, but the Carbine was just way cooler looking and I am extremely biased. The Concussion Rifle is the actual brute shot replacement, being a rapidly firing grenade launcher that knocks people around and deals decent damage. It's nothing special, but it does what it sets out to be, which is shoot a lot of grenades. The beam rifle is mercifully gone, and all those who played Halo 2 on Legendary rejoiced, for it was good. Honestly, I was never really crazy about this weapon's design, as it basically is just a reskinned sniper rifle, but I must say the replacement, the focus rifle, is basically just a reskinned version of the Sentinel beam, which feels very out of place for a sniper rifle equivalent, as instead of flatlining someone from a continent away, you just kind of tickle them a little bit. I don't know, maybe I don't get this gun, but I just don't really care for the focus rifle and find it to be a cool looking but ineffective toy. And speaking of ineffective toys, the plasma launcher comes in as the Covenant's solution to the Spartan laser as a vehicle-destroying monster, but instead of a long charge for an instant and powerful laser strike, you charge for a long time to basically just throw a few plasma grenades that travel slowly, home in a little bit and explode on their targets. At the end of the day, it does do its job, I just find it takes too long to do anything worthwhile, and any other explosive weapon does its job better. Take the fuel rod for example, which continues to serve its role as the Covenant's rocket launcher. I mean, I don't have much else to say, it feels good because it's a high explosive rocket launcher. The energy sword and gravity hammer both return as high damaging melee only weapons that feel so satisfying to get a hit with, as they tend to instantly kill enemies. Even in situations where they might be a poor choice, they just look and feel too cool to pass up, and I'm a big fan of these iconic weapons. Now be honest with me, if you've played Halo Reach, did you remember that the Spiker was in this game? The Brute's toy of choice in Halo 3 is basically just a non-homing and non-exploding version of the Needler that does good damage but sort of just blends in with a lot of the other automatic weapons. That said, despite how forgettable its inclusion is, it might just genuinely be a better assault rifle in every way, even giving you a stronger melee attack that helps justify its weird inclusion. The plasma grenade is a grenade that sticks to enemies and explodes after a short time. Now, I didn't realise when I wrote the script that I actually forgot to include any of the turrets, such as the machine gun, the Covenant's equivalent of it, the Shade turrets. I'm shocked I managed to forget the one that serves as George's signature weapon, but other than looking cool, I think they just appear too rarely to be memorable enough. Vehicle time. The Warthog is a nimble 3-seater car that can come equipped with a turret, rocket launchers or a Gauss rifle, or even no weapon. It's iconic and it drives smoother than it ever has, and is a consistent tool with a few friends. The Mongoose is back again and is still a radical little two-man quad bike that moves very fast but leaves you very exposed. The Scorpion is a large tank that makes you feel like you're inside of a large tank, and the Falcon replaces the Hornet as the UNSC's designated flying vehicle, going from a weird helicopter type vehicle to basically just a helicopter straight out of Vietnam. Though it requires a few friends to be fully effective, it flies like a dream. The Ghost is the typical Covenant vehicle, being a little one-man floating car thingy that lets you shoot its front-facing guns and do a little boost. It's fast, it's furious, and it's an icon in its own right. Much like the Banshee, which I always maintain as being the flying alternative to the Ghost, with cool flips and a bomb launcher to make it extra cool. The Wraith is the Covenant's tank, firing more of a mortar strike instead of a straight missile, but getting a boost to play with as well. And as is seemingly tradition, the Covenant have got a new medium-weight vehicle to replace the previous Prowler that replaced the previous Spectre. Unlike those two which tried to replicate the Warthog, this is more like a miniature Wraith that is much more nippy but leaves you exposed, like the Wraith and Ghost had a reddish child. There's also that spaceship we got to fly, the Sabre, which only appears in that one level and feels like flying a super fast jet, so it makes sense it never appears again because it's fun enough for its sole purpose, but isn't much worth using outside of that purpose. The Covenant's equivalent is the Seraph, which you can only fly in Forge-made maps, and it's functionally identical to the Sabre. All three variations of dropships we have previously seen return, with the UNSC's iconic Pelican and the Covenant getting both the Phantom and Combat Evolved Spirit to deploy from, which just feels like fan service since they aren't pilotable outside of a weird Easter egg that lets you fly a facsimile of the real thing that doesn't feel very good. But of course I can't talk about the vehicles of Halo Reach without bringing up the MVP, the forklift. If you were ever in doubt and needed evidence to back up why Noble 6 is considered to be on par skills-wise as Master Chief, just remember that all of Chief's combat prowess and his impressive feats pale in comparison to Noble 6 being forklift certified. There's also a few other slow vehicles, but none of them are forklifts, so I don't really know why we're talking about them. Enemies this time around include all of the Covenant classics we've grown used to since Halo 2. Grunts die in one shot and usually carry weaker weapons, but sometimes get to use the fuel rod or run at you to give you a big explosive hug. Jackals are similarly squishy as grunts, but carry a shield that makes them either have to be stripped away, or requires you to shoot their hands before getting an opening on them. Drones are basically nothing more than flying squishy boys, not having much health but usually appearing in large swarms that all fire plasma pistols at you so frequently that it does eventually start to hurt. Fortunately their fragility and their very infrequent appearances mean they're not too bad. Elites return to being your typical enemy once again, where they have shields and a variety of weapons with different armor colours and styles dictating the approximate threat level. Some elites have swords, some have concussion rifles, some have needle rifles, and some of them even have the audacity to dual wield despite that being illegal now. The Brutes are back to once again functioning more like they did in Halo 2, but just less frustrating. They still go into a rage when you kill their friends, and they have helmets that need to be shot off before you can go in for the kill, but I like this version of brutes. They feel like the correct middle ground between the versatility of Halo 3 and the gimmicks of Halo 2. Hunters are the prevailing big boys that take a million years to kill due to how tanky they are. This might be the strongest version of Hunters thus far, as they pack a threatening fuel rod gun and a slam that will kill you no matter what, as well as taking a good while to whittle away at their health. They only come in pairs, and unfortunately I'm not sure anything can one-shot them anymore, making them a very interesting and memorable encounter, unlike many of their previous appearances. And if you can believe it, even the engineers from ODST return, giving shields to nearby enemies and making it a priority to focus fire on them, to strip the enemies of these shields to make them vulnerable, adding a unique gameplay element to any combat encounter featuring them. They also explode when they die, but since they fly high up in the air, this never really seems to matter too much. And with all that, we can all rejoice knowing that the Sniper Jackal did not return. And then weep, knowing that they were simply replaced by a new enemy type called the Skirmisher. These guys are interesting, as they are basically just a variant of Jackals that typically wield long-range rifles, like the Focus Rifle or Needle Rifle, neither of which are as strong as the Beam Rifle, meaning that overall, it wouldn't shock me if people didn't know that they were technically a new enemy type. Allegedly, from a lore perspective, the Skirmishers were a sort of offshoot species of Jackal that went extinct after the invasion of Reach, though they do return in Halo Infinite, so I don't really know what's up with these guys. They're Sniper Jackal in everything but name, basically, although some of them do get these cool little Captain America from Infinity War type shields, but overall, much like their typical Jackal brethren, they all die in a headshot anyway, which I think now leaves us with just armor abilities left to talk about. I think. So we'll start with the most simple one, Sprint. According to Merriam-Webster, sprinting is the act of running at top speed for a short distance. That is accurate. Active camouflage makes you invisible and then jams the radars of everyone nearby, which annoyingly includes yourself. It also makes you sound really muffled, and moving in anything other than a crawl will make you visible. Cool idea, but I find the audio thing to just be too annoying to be worthwhile. Hologram is an amazing concept. Sending forth an image of the user that runs forward is a distraction that enemies shoot. Very effective against the Covenant, though players might be harder to fool. It's just such a fun and silly concept though. The drop shield basically just replaces Halo 3's iconic bubble shield, being an instantly deployable dome that keeps you safe from external fire while inside, while also regenerating your health and shields, making it probably the most underrated armor ability in the game. The most unique armor ability, however, is the jetpack. It lets you hover in the air for a while, and you can just shoot people from the sky or get to places that would otherwise be inaccessible by using it. It's just such a neat idea that completely changes how you approach combat once it gets involved. Unfortunately though, at least for multiplayer, most of these are outclassed by the armor lock ability, which apparently in game is referred to as armor lockup, which just feels wrong to say. This lets you ground pound, becoming completely invincible but immobile for a short duration, and sets off an EMP when it ends. Also, for some reason the ground pound can destroy vehicles. This ability is just absurdly strong and useful in every situation, with Sprint being the only one that I can think of is on its tier of being an absolute necessity, and it's so obscenely powerful that it breaks the game apart in some ways. And out of principle, I'd much rather use the more interesting ones where possible. There's also a multiplayer exclusive evade module that lets you do a cool flip to evade some damage, break lock-ons like the plasma pistol, and cover a lot of distance, especially when used on a ramp. I think it's really fun while making the infection game mode very addictive. And now that, I do believe, is all of them. Weapons, vehicles, enemy types, armor abilities. I'm pretty sure that's just about everything gameplay-wise about Halo Reach. Like I said, there's a lot of variety in there, and while not everything is as good as the others, variety is oft described as the spice of life, and if that is the case, then Halo Reach is among the spiciest of Halos, with all of these tools feeling at the very least fun to use, even if they aren't as good as their contemporaries. It isn't all sunshine and rainbows when it comes to the gameplay of Reach, however. There are a few things that people take issue with, and those armor abilities are typically top of that list. Armor lock gets a very justified amount of hatred, but people at the time were shockingly vocal of their dislike of things like Sprint, viewing it as some sort of unnecessary feature to attract Call of Duty fans to the game, and others just didn't like the equipment from Halo 3 and hated this cooldown based evolution of a concept they were already against. Personally, and I'm really sorry to admit this, I play Overwatch. Abilities with a cooldown are something I barely even register as a point of contention anymore because of how ingrained they are in my gaming habits, and so I have no issues with the implementations of armor abilities in Reach. More so, I take issue with the balancing of them instead. To me, being able to sprint or fly briefly is a convenience that just speeds things up and gets you to the action quicker or in a more unique way. So I don't really get the hatred because to me it just adds to the fun. But I suppose from the standpoint that it is a bit of a change and departure from the classic simplistic Halo gameplay, I can sort of see the issue, I just don't fully agree with it. The other thing people hate is much more justified, however, as it's a little mechanic known as bloom. In a shooter game, you point your crosshair at a location, press the shoot button, and you fire with that crosshair. It's simple, it's universal, and it works. Halo Reach, for whatever reason, implements a mechanic that makes it so that instead of firing at the crosshair, there are random degrees of variation around the crosshair that the bullet can travel to instead, which is especially problematic on precision weapons like the pistol or DMR, making it so that, especially at longer ranges, it's sometimes just up to pure luck whether or not you're going to hit the target. This is not only stupid, but it's also idiotic, as I think it removes a lot of competitive integrity from the game, when I'm suddenly unable to hit someone because the game decided I wasn't allowed to. Bloom removes player agency and just generally feels bad and unfair. The worst part is that I think I even understand what goal they're trying to achieve, in that they're looking to make precision weapons like the DMR not as effective at longer ranges to encourage them to be more medium-range weapons, and they're trying to make sure that fights happen a bit closer together rather than a whole map apart. Yeah, it does encourage that by making it harder to hit people at longer ranges. You naturally gravitate to wanting to fight people a bit closer to make sure you hit more of your shots. But why not just make the bullets do less damage at longer ranges? There are plenty of games out there that already do this exact thing, including that existed at the time, like Team Fortress 2. So it just makes Bloom feel like a well-intentioned but very poorly considered implementation of a mechanic that serves primarily to just make the user feel bad every now and then. In spite of the villainous and dastardly Bloom ruining our good times, I do still love Reach's gameplay personally, and since I grew up with it, I never really had an issue with these mechanics when I was younger, only finding them now to be a problem looking back with more experience under my belt. Reach is a fun game at its core, with so many tools to play with in its arsenal that give it a lot of variety to have fun with, which is, at the end of the day, what a video game is there to do. Wait, I missed the most important weapon of all, the one that Halo Reach simply wouldn't feel the same without. The Golf Club, a multiplayer exclusive reskin of the Gravity Hammer that is just a weird joke weapon. Alright, we spent long enough here and I think 6 is just about to crash down on Reach right about now.
I know we're losing. I want to know if we've lost.
Back on solid ground once again, the now Georgeless Noble Six picks themselves up and stumbles gracelessly towards distant smoke, overlooking the damage that the Covenant had managed to cause in the short time they were away. The largest, most prominent city on the entire planet, New Alexandria, is being invaded. The Covenant are razing it to the ground, slaughtering its people, burning the buildings, and the UNSC are scrambling whatever resources they can to mount an evacuation effort. Up until now, the game has taken its bleak premise into that of a vaguely motivational story of Noble Team up against the odds and seemingly dealing some serious blows against the Covenant, even if it means taking some hits in the meantime. But the end of Long Night of Solace, and especially these next two missions, the tone stops being even remotely uplifting or motivational, and it honestly pretty suddenly turns to a fairly dark place. Moments after entering the city and getting to play, you see bodies littering the streets, with implications that even children have been killed, and you make your way through dimly lit corridors with grunts blowing themselves up to try and take you down, equipped with very little weaponry to make things just that little bit more hopeless feeling. Eventually, after clambering through some maintenance areas, you meet up with a squad of ODSTs. I hear that these guys are kinda legendary, and then you get to jetpack your way across this chasm, though you cannot steal these Banshees. As you progress, the tone of this level and the tone of this city stay pretty bleak as you see the attempted evacuations of civilians across the entirety of it, as well as being the game's introduction to brutes trying to, well, brutalize the population of New Alexandria. And you make your way slowly towards a falcon on a balcony. Falcony, if you will. The Falcon flies you across the city to a beachhead housing the controls for a missile array, hoping to disable the weaponry of a ship that is destroying transports attempting to leave the city. Case in point, one of the darkest moments the Halo game has had, as a large transport ship housing civilians is shot down, crashing into the ocean with no survivors. And despite 6 successfully enabling the missile array and helping in the exodus of the remaining survivors, things only get worse from here. The good news is, 6 is able to get back in contact with Kat. The bad news? New Alexandria has fallen, and it's up to Noble Team to oversee the destruction of various signal jammers throughout the city's skyline in order to ensure that those remaining survivors can evacuate safely. Meaning we get to fly a Falcon throughout the night sky of the flaming ruins of the city in by far the most unique mission a Halo game has probably ever had. You have 3 buildings you need to visit, but the order in which you visit the 3 buildings is selected at random, with Kat telling you your next objective. Between each one is one of a list of much smaller objectives that typically involve flying around to less interesting buildings to either destroy or escort some sort of vehicle or turret. The primary objectives take you to a fancy penthouse filled with drones, a banging nightclub filled with hunters, and a hospital initially filled with brutes but then later filled with jetpack elites. Each one being a nice little mission in and of itself, then you can tackle them in a few different ways due to the almost open world nature of the level as a whole. The game oh so desperately wants for me to get out of the bird and walk in through the front door, or I can fly around and under and enter through the back. Each playthrough of the mission will play out differently due to the random nature of it, and those in-between secondary objectives are pretty varied and take you all over the place. One of them even features a cameo from Edward ODST Buck himself. The coolest part though, is that as the level progresses, this dark and stormy night becomes more and more atmospheric, as you see in yonder distance the destruction wrought by the Covenant as they begin to glass the planet's surface, as in shooting a big old laser beam that turns the planet's surface molten. It sets a lovely visual and a depressing atmosphere for the level, setting the tone for the rest of the game to come, as is established in the ending cutscene for this level after you finish the final objective to destroy some turrets and see the Pelicans escape with the rest of the refugees on board. In this cutscene, Kat asks an important question about the war, stating that she knows the UNSC are losing, but she wants to know if, as far as the rest of the squad should know, they have lost the war for Reach. While this is going on, there is a brief mourning period between Emil, Jern and Six over George, before the family reunion is interrupted by Holland hailing Noble Team on an unsecure channel, giving them a priority mission to attend, though the call is also interrupted by,
That close!
well, that. Seems the Covenant's glassing has gotten a lot closer, and Noble scramble to get to a relatively safe pickup point as the city melts around them. Six and Kat ride the elevator, with Kat, the only one not to have had her armor fully equipped at the time, clearly shaken by the glassing. And whether it was due to her armor not being fully powered, due to her helmet being off, or due to an extraordinarily lucky shot, Kat is shot by a jackal straight through the head just after she leaves the lift. The whole team going from a panicked sprint to a sudden pause without any time to process the sudden loss of another member of their team. All they can do is follow their next orders from Holland, devoid of their most intelligent team member.
Mankind is outmatched. When Reach falls, and it will fall, our annihilation is all but certain.
Holland's orders would see Noble Team, or what's left of it, returning to Sword Base for a demolition operation, infiltrate the base, plant the explosives at the given coordinates, get out and watch it go boom, along with any valuable data that the Covenant could be looking for there, as Halsey had suggested earlier. Simple enough, Six is dropped off outside the now flooded exterior of the base, no doubt as a result of the rapidly onset climate change and tectonic madness of all that glassing going on. They start off right where you did all the communication stuff in the initial visit to Sword Base, and then you move on to where you enabled aerial defences previously. This time, however, you were destroying another AA gun. Now, I never really noticed before just how frequently Halo 3 and Halo Reach have you destroy AA guns and or wraiths as objectives before progressing, but it seems Bungie clearly had a favourite objective type towards the end of their tenure with Halo. Oh, and this is also the tank level. Once you get into the Sword Base, things progress pretty similarly as before. In a way, it's almost reminiscent of those later levels from Halo Combat Evolved, going through similar areas but reskinned and repackaged. Just enough to feel different, but still clearly being the same basic idea. I would say that this is a bit better than those for the most part though, since the real meat and potatoes of this level begins upon arriving at the coordinates provided to Noble Team, which is just some random cupboard. Arty.dot notes, however, that another AI has updated the coordinates to now be deep underground, which deeply frustrates Noble Team, who don't even really want to be here to begin with, and they plan initially to just leave and plant the explosives elsewhere, ignoring all the AI, until they stumble onto a hidden tramway hidden behind the wall, which conveniently takes them deep underground to those exact coordinates, at the behest of none other than Halsey. As it would seem, the latchkey that Kat had collected right at the start of the game was the final piece of the puzzle for Halsey's old pet project that she had been working on all this time on Reach. Now she's finally ready to finish it, and put it into action to take down the Covenant once and for all. Or at least she will be ready to finish it in a few minutes' time, hence getting Holland to send Noble Team to her discreetly in order to make sure that they were able to buy her just a few more precious moments. To finish things up protected by the only Spartan 3 team she has any faith in, the one that brought her the latchkey to begin with, and the one that George had loved. This leads to a long fight, a true epic tale of Spartans holding a small area against insurmountable odds, enough to make even Zack Snyder weep. I wish I had more to say about it, but honestly not much else really happens here besides holding out. And there's a lot of different toys to play with and ways to go about this, even hijacking Banshees is back on the menu. As such, I would mostly summarise my experiences with the remainder of the gameplay of this level as just being a really nostalgic thing for me. I think back in 2010 this is the part me and my brother struggled with the most playing it co-op, and while it's not the most dynamic or creative part of the game per se, I just like it a lot. Maybe it's just the beautiful design of this cave, or how massive the battle feels in its scope. I don't know exactly what it is, I just have a lot of of personal bias towards this bit for some reason. Eventually, Halsey finishes powdering her nose, and she invites the gang in to look upon the heart of her operation, and see just what it is that was so important as to drag them all the way out here, unveiling the thing that she believes will turn the tide of the war, Cortana. Already, Cortana has crunched the numbers, and determined exactly where she needs to be and who she'll take her there. Noble Team is going to deliver Cortana to Captain Jacob Keyes of the UNSC Pillar of Autumn, and Noble 6 is going to be the one to carry her there. Halsey is reluctant to let Cortana go. An AI she had designed to be a small part of herself, like the daughter she never had, provided we ignore the daughter that she already did actually have. But ultimately she acquiesces and lets go of Cortana. Carter, Emil and Six head off to take Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn, while Jun leaves them all to take Halsey off-world and to safety. The two Pelicans head in different directions, as those explosives detonate and the remnants of the lab collapse in on themselves, leaving nothing of value for the Covenant to find. Unfortunately, this would be the last time Jun would ever see the rest of Noble Team.
This is Keyes on hot approach to Platform Delta.
Sometime after leaving Sword Base and heading toward the shipyard where the Pillar of Autumn is stationed, the Pelican containing Carter, Emil and Six came under attack, and Carter in particular seems to have taken the worst of the damage. Covered in blood and looking particularly under the weather, he makes the decision to have the other two finish the journey on foot while he keeps the Banshees distracted in the sky. Wishing their commander the best, the two jump down and slide down the side of a cliff, beginning the final mad dash through this barren land to get to the shipyard. For the most part, this level is a long, straight line, and other than some great visuals, the early parts of the level are basic. Kill some enemies, get on a mongoose and drive through this absolute chaos as the Covenant are dropping troops and scarabs into a large canyon. Interestingly, this is actually the only time scarabs appear in gameplay in Reach, and they are not a boss like they were in Halo 3, this time really just being a cool set piece that you run away from, with Six and Emil making their way into a series of caves. Unfortunately, it seems that one of the scarabs has managed to cut off their escape, with no way possible for the two of them to get past it. Lucky for them, Carter has managed to stave off death by Banshee for long enough, but acknowledging that his guns won't be enough to take the scarab down, gives his best wishes to what's left of Noble Team as he slams his Pelican at full pelt straight into the side of the Scarab, going out in a true blaze of glory for the good of his squad. All that are now left of Noble Team on Reach are these two, Emil and Six. The rest are gone, quite literally in Jun's case, and these two are the only ones now who can finish the fight. After a bit more walking, they reach the shipyard, and fight their way through the Covenant's forces. Much like the previous level, they paint a real massive battle here that is exceptionally grand in scope, with the stakes feeling higher than ever, now that we know how exactly the story is going to tie in to the Master Chief trilogy. And throughout this level, the game has you fight just about every type of enemy that is present. Drones, brute chieftains, hunters, wraiths, fuel rod turrets, and visible elites. This game is really difficult on Legendary, surpassed only really by Halo 2, and quite frankly even on Heroic I think this level can be a bit of a pain to progress through towards the end. Though unlike Halo 2, I never found it to be an unfair challenge. In fact, it's just the right amount of challenge for a final mission, which makes reaching the end of the gauntlet and getting to see the Pillar of Autumn in all its glory really satisfying. Once there, Keyes himself says he will come down to retrieve Cortana in person once the landing pad is secure. Emil sees a big gun and excitedly hurries off to go shoot down incoming enemy ships, while Six holds the pad against Covenant dropships for a while. Much like the previous level, they throw just about everything at you here, and it is a true fight for your life in a far smaller location than you had underground. At the end of it, Keyes flies on down in a Pelican and approaches Noble 6. This is the first time a game has featured him since Chief extracted his neural implants, and it really feels like the franchise coming full circle as we draw to a close now at the end of Bungie's final game, with both Captain Keyes and the Pillar of Autumn present. After Keyes takes Cortana out of our hands and gets back into his Pelican, some Phantoms show up and shoot down the other Pelican that escorted him, and they drop off some zealots at the big gun Emil is manning, leading into the fantastic scene as Emil is forced to deal with them, gunning one down with a proper meat shot before a second elite comes from behind and stabs him through the chest. Like its former commander, however, Emil doesn't go down without a fight, stabbing the zealot in the throat and dragging him down with him as our final squadmate dies. You know, excluding Jun, of course. While Keyes' men urge Six to get aboard the ship, they decline. Noble 6 has the gun, and they will protect Keyes and Cortana leaving the planet with their life. So, we make our way to the gun where Emil died, through a small squadron of pretty formidable enemies, in one final mad dash to save the day. On the gun, you simply sit there and gun down incoming Phantoms to keep yourself alive as you look after the Pillar of Autumn so that combat evolved can occur. It doesn't last too long before the mission ends with us watching the ship take off and leave Six behind on the planet. Oh, and there's Master Chief. Ordinarily, this would be the finale to the game. It even plays an epilogue after this where we see the ship approaching Alpha Halo, as Keyes asks Cortana if they lost their pursuers, leading pretty directly into the opening cutscene of the first game. But this isn't quite where the game ends, as we return to the perspective of Noble 6, briefly.
Negative. I have the gun. Good luck, sir.
This is the final mission of Halo Reach, a brief section where we see Noble 6 stood proud, watching Banshees fly past as they enter one of the shipyards nearby, and you are placed into gameplay with one objective. An objective you might have seen in various memes across the internet, as the game tells you to simply survive. You have no orders, no objective to protect the people or to save the day. Reach at this point has fallen. Humanity has lost this conflict. We know what the future holds of Master Chief's various adventures with Cortana, Johnson, the Arbiter, and we know that everything sort of works out in the end. But right here, right now at the end of Halo Reach, Noble 6 has watched as all of those around them have systematically died one by one. George, the heavy weapons expert of the group, went out as the result of the largest possible weapon imaginable. Kat, the brains, died to a headshot. Chun, the sniper who kept his distance, leaves the squad. Carter, the captain, goes down with his ship. And Emil, the guy wild enough to carve a skull into his helmet, goes down like the absolute psycho he was. And so, despite Carter's direct orders not to, 6 now finds themselves a lone wolf once more. Noble Team is fallen, and 6 is perhaps the last human being still alive on the entire planet. As such, they try to survive. You fight against endless waves of incoming enemies, fighting them with limited and dwindling resources. As the battle progresses, your helmet begins to slowly get damaged over time, removing valuable information from your HUD, stopping your ability to regenerate your shields. Each crack making the odds ever the more insurmountable, until, inevitably, no matter what you do and no matter how well you play, you will fail your objective. You can survive for a while, some people have gone above and beyond and survived for many hours, but no matter what happens, Noble 6 will never leave Reach. No matter what happens, you will be killed by a series of elites, leaving your damaged helmet to sit in the dirt. And over 30 years later, long after Halo Reach was set, and long after not only Halo 3, but even well beyond the scope of modern titles like Halo Infinite, we see how things have changed. With the Covenant War concluded, and presumably an era of peace once again descending on the galaxy, humanity returns to Reach. And in a voiceover, Halsey leaves us with a powerful and poignant quote.
Our victory, your victory, was so close. I wish you could have lived to see it. But you belong to Reach. Your body, your armor, all burned and turned to glass. Everything. Except your courage. That you gave to us. And with it, we can rebuild.
Slayer.
I was racking my brain for a while, thinking of what exactly to title the chapter that would discuss the multiplayer of Halo Reach. I could have kept it simple, just made it focus on the multiplayer of the game, maybe make a joke about Bloom or Armorlock ruining it, or just have it as some nice thing like Bungie's farewell. As I said in the start of this video, Halo Reach is the Halo game I played the most when I was younger. It's the multiplayer that defined the first-person shooter genre to me, and it's a game that I truly love, warts and all. And in thinking, it occurred to me why exactly that is. It's not about playing the typical shooter game modes like Slayer, Capture the Flag or King of the Hill. These game modes are fun, but you know what really strikes me as the thing I love about Halo Reach? It's a platform. Halo 3 introduced Forge mode and allowed people's imaginations to run wild, making just all sorts of nonsense map changes and gameplay ideas that helped form long-lasting communities and let player creativity shine. Reach improves upon Forge mode in every single aspect. Even some of Bungie's official multiplayer maps were made almost entirely within Forge itself, and everything people had made in Halo 3 was improved upon in Reach to make a truly long-lasting and self-sufficient community of talented creators and, frankly, weirdos who are out there making bizarre and fun Forge maps to this day. Some of them are more serious and earnest attempts at a relatively competitive multiplayer map, but on the other side of the spectrum, you have something like the iconic Achievement Hunter Horse series of videos that typically involved a series of inane challenges and silly racetracks floating in mid-air. Firefight mode also returned from ODST with a slew of improvements and more gameplay variety. The game featured DLC maps that expanded its repertoire, and even brought back some fan-favourite maps from when the original Combat Evolved Anniversary was released. And the Master Chief Collection version of Reach expands on Forge even further by giving giving you access to spaceships, forklifts, and more tools to play with to make your creations even more absurd. Yeah, Bloom is annoying and armor lock ruins the balance of the game, and while playing Halo Reach multiplayer online is fun enough, in today's landscape it can feel dated. But those custom game communities that Halo 3 and especially Reach fostered are still there in the Master Chief Collection to this day, and that in and of itself is something that I can't view as anything but legendary.
For you had already passed the torch.
And that is just about everything I have to say about Halo Reach. Tonally, it rocks. I think they flawlessly executed what they set out to achieve, and the story of Noble Team in their desperate plight to initially save the planet before pivoting into a tale of tragedy and loss is hard-hitting, with greatly varied gameplay and a whole bunch of iconic moments and set pieces to boot. It's not a perfect game by any means. I think it falls into the pitfall of muddier late 360 graphics that so many of its peers did, and the weapon balancing is pretty flawed once again, with clearly dominant weapons that are also, for some reason, stuck with a frustrating and unengaging mechanic. Add in gameplay shakeups like Sprint and its other armor ability brethren, which are still viewed as a controversial shakeup to the classic Halo formula, and that's not even going into all the ire that this game's story draws from book fans. Basically, the book The Fall of Reach details a very different version of events regarding the downfall of Reach that focuses on Master Chief and a different team of Spartans. The book is very different both tonally and narratively to the game, to the extent that the two simply cannot exist in the same canon, with many book fans who had been with the franchise for so long being upset to hear that Halo Reach was retconning parts of the story, and that this game would be considered the new actual version of events that happened. Truthfully, I've never read this book. I can empathise with the frustrations these people must have, but I don't know any more specific details than that. Retcons can feel like a cheap move that removes a lot of attachment to a series when you suddenly think that anything can just be changed whenever the creators want to, in order to pivot the story in a different direction. If it had happened more often in Halo, then perhaps there would be cause for concern. But as far as I know, this is the only real time they use the game's narrative to actively run counter to her books, rather than having the two supplement the lore and world building of one another. Despite some of these complaints miring Halo Reach as the most controversial Bungie Halo game there is, I think my personal attachment, and no doubt the personal attachments of a great number of people within or formerly within the Halo communities, view this game as perhaps the last truly great Halo game. The last time that the franchise felt like an unstoppable juggernaut, before Bungie left to work on Destiny and the franchise was passed along to a company named 343 Industries. Nowadays they are known as Halo Studios, and they have, as of current, released a total of 3 mainline Halo games: Halo 4, Halo 5 Guardians, and Halo Infinite, with future plans to remake Halo Combat Evolved and the amusingly titled Halo Campaign Evolved. Unfortunately, none of them have ever lived up to what Bungie had achieved with the franchise, and frankly I'm not sure Bungie has ever achieved this kind of acclaim again either, which I guess just goes to show what Halo Reach truly is. The end of an era.